Not feeling aligned with your friendships. Maybe you have some friendship woes. Maybe this time of pandemic is having you question your friendships. Perhaps you've got the time and space to be thinking about this stuff. Then today's Q&A will support you. I hope, if you're willing to love yourself enough to put into action the process that I'm going to share with you. Because self-love is all about self-responsibility, right? So I'm not an agony aunt who comes onto these Q&As and answers your questions like I have all the answers, because I don't. And as a transformational coach and as a therapeutic coach, my job is actually to listen to what's going on for a client and really kind of dig deeper and dial into what's specifically going on for her to find a solution that is aligned with her and for her. So today's Q&A question around friendship, I'm going to give you a fairly kind of generalized response, and then you can work it in with whatever's going on for you. Hi Flo, good to see you, darling. And I'll be seeing you later as well, won't I? So as you're arriving on Facebook, just say hello. It'd be lovely to know who's joining. Otherwise, I think I'll just kick off. I think most of you know who I am. I'm Katie Phillips. I founded the School of Self-Love. I wrote a book called The Self-Love Affair, A Woman's Guide to a Daring and Mighty Life. And you're joining now for my Wednesday live Q&A session as part of my Cocoon and Cuppa series. So great to have you as you're joining. Hello, hello. Hey, Natalie. Yeah, great. So I'm live on Instagram and Facebook. So I am looking at a couple of different cameras if you wonder why I'm like looking all over the place. Hi, Pelia. How you doing? Good to see you. All right. So this is the question that I have. And for complete transparency, I have paraphrased this question because it was actually during a coaching session with a group of mine that I was posed this question, but it wasn't posed as the most succinct question because, let's be honest, when it comes to friendships and our emotions, it can feel a lot and it can feel actually hard to get to the nut, the core of what you're actually trying to ask, So this client was sharing all sorts of situations and scenarios with me around her friendships. And she was noticing that at this time of pandemic, she was really realizing what friendships were having her feel good, what were having her feel bad, what was bringing up guilt, and so on. So she kind of shared some stories with me, and I've made that more succinct into a question so I can share the question with you here and then share the answer that I gave her. So her question was, I'm not feeling aligned with all of my friendships, but I don't know what to do about it. I have a lot of confusing and contradicting feelings around this too. I feel guilty when I don't want to spend time with someone, and I feel annoyed when they don't contact me. I also feel cross with myself when I spend time with someone that doesn't make me feel good, and I don't know how to handle things differently. I'm pretty sure when she listens back to me reading that question, she'll be like, oh yeah, that's exactly what I was trying to ask. But I'm wondering if you can notice as well in that question, she doesn't at any point say what she does want. Right? So, and this is really common, and I wonder if you can relate, and I know that I can. Often our first awareness of a situation is what doesn't feel good. We really tune in very quickly to that doesn't feel right for me, and I don't know why necessarily, but something's not feeling good for me. We know what we don't want, but often we haven't actually taken the time to kind of tune into what we do want. We haven't taken the time to get clarity on what we want instead, and I really believe that's what self-love is all about. I'm really fierce about what self-love is, and it's about loving yourself enough to take the time to really tune in and feel into what's going on for you and what do you want instead. So rather than kind of like hanging out in the land of victim and I know what I don't want, how about moving into that more empowered space that has clarity around what you do want? And that takes a lot of bravery, doesn't it? Because often in getting really clear on what you do want can very possibly require a lot of courage. It could very possibly mean you have to move out of your comfort zone. I was speaking with another client yesterday in a different coaching group, and she was telling me how she writes her morning pages every day and how one day she wrote the word divorce in her morning pages and then had to close the book and walk away from it. And couldn't look at it for quite some time because just writing that word was enormous. It took such courage for her to even acknowledge that word. But that word meant that big change was coming in her life, right? But until she acknowledged where she was at and what she wanted instead, rather than focusing on, and I wouldn't be surprised if her morning pages for months, if not years, were all about what she didn't want anymore, what wasn't working about the relationship. When she got the clarity on this has to end, and she wrote that scary word divorce, things were going to shift. We move into a space of huge courage. So to go back to this conversation around friendship, first of all, I've had several, the reason I'm bringing this question up this week is because I've had it from several clients. It feels like this time of pandemic where we're all craving hugs and we're craving our friendships and we're craving company. It also seems to be highlighting friendships that we realize that having not seen someone for a period of time, that maybe we're not missing them. Maybe we feel a little bit lighter. Maybe guilt is coming up though around people you're not reaching out to and so on. But it does seem to be a time where people are kind of reassessing their friendships. And again, I wonder if you can relate with that as well. I know that I'm noticing my stronger friendships are clearly the people who I am bothering to be in touch with. And I mean, that's not a blanket statement because there's lots of people I really care about who I'm not being in touch with right now. No comment on that, but I am also noticing the very, very deeply connected friendships are the ones that I am regularly in touch with, who I'm having the quiz calls with and, you know, that kind of thing. Anyway, so what I was hearing in this client's question was the lack of clarity. She knew what she didn't want. She knew what wasn't feeling good, but she didn't know what she wanted instead. So that's where we went with this conversation. She wasn't empowered in knowing what she wanted instead. And she was feeling a lot of guilt because she hadn't fully connected with and owned what she wanted. So there's all these kind of uncomfortable, guilty feelings, right? So here's what we do. We're going to have to love ourselves enough to take a beat, to take a few moments. You know what I'm going to say? Get our journals out, sit with ourselves for a moment and just tune in. And the first question I would invite you to answer in your journal was, how can I acknowledge and honor this friendship? That's step one. Before we get to any answers about the friendship, before I even say anything else, before we do anything else with this, if you look at the friendships that are bringing you any level of discomfort, any level of guilt, if you're feeling like you're people pleasing in some way, whatever the discomfort is, you've had a friendship with this person for a reason. It's bringing up uncomfortable feelings because perhaps at one point this friendship really did mean something to you. Maybe you received something powerful from it. And before you go forward with it, and we're in complete surrender at this point, by the way, we don't know if this friendship is going to proceed. We don't know if it's going to end. We don't know if just the boundaries around it are going to change, if the nature of the friendship is going to evolve a little bit. We don't know the answer yet. All we know is you're uncomfortable. And the first step to unraveling that, to move to a space of empowerment and clarity of knowing what you do want, you got to acknowledge the friendship first. It's really, really important. It's a gratitude piece and it's an acknowledgement piece. So just do some journaling around what this person has meant to you. Maybe reminisce on how you met. Maybe reminisce on experiences you shared together, on how you've helped and supported each other, how, I don't know, who knows what life threw at you and what you experienced together. What have you learned from that person? So it's a chance first to just dial in to honoring the relationship, which I think is really, really important. And I think even when you're ready for a friendship to end, I think it's so important to honor what was, whether you do that privately or whether you are able to do that in conversation with the person. At some level, I think honoring what was is really an important and healthy way to move forward. So step one, when you're unsure about friendships, if you've got friendship woes, if you're confused, I'm just going to grab a tissue, acknowledge it first. And oh, hi, Sophie. And then I had some feedback from a different client on this subject who's going through this, or is about to go through this body of work. and ask herself these 3 questions that I'm posing to you today. And she hasn't begun it yet because she's nervous and she's scared that maybe the friendship has to end, although she doesn't have her answer yet. She's scared. She doesn't really want to lose the friendship. She feels like to spend time acknowledging and honoring the friendship is going to feel really, really sad and like some kind of grieving process. And she's just not ready to let it go yet. And I think that's okay. And I think that's probably going to be part of it. And in my experience, and I have done this work multiple times, I find the gratitude and acknowledgement piece around friendships when I'm honoring them can be the most heart-opening, vulnerable, softening experience. So no matter what comes next, it's coming from a place of real love for what was. Yeah, that's really important. And then we move into step 2. So we've done your acknowledgement and honoring. Then you're going to ask yourself the question, what is no longer serving me about this? So you're starting this process because there's a discomfort, something's not working for you. So now is the time to make yourself the center of attention. Just you and your journal. It's all about you. The habit can be with friendships, which is why we don't have the clarity on what we want. We can be in such a habit of focusing on other people's needs, of being all things to all people, of showing up in a way that works for them, but maybe doesn't work for you. And you can get into this kind of people-pleasing, maybe even codependent habit of whatever they need, I'll make that happen, because if they're okay, then I can feel okay. If they're not okay, I don't feel okay. So that can be quite an unhealthy codependent relationship. When we're in that habit, we really need to change up the gears, snap out of that habit, which, by the way, can take a little bit of time. But start to learn to put yourself first. Start to learn to make you the center of attention, you the center of your focus. It's allowed. I know in the beginning you might feel guilty to do that. It might feel really awkward and icky and self-indulgent. But at the end of the day, if you aren't your number one priority, then none of your friendships are going to feel aligned and authentic. And you will feel that. And ultimately, they will feel that. And that is just a lose-lose scenario. And we want win-win scenarios, right? So step 2, acknowledge what is no longer serving you about the relationship. And this becomes a really fantastic emotional expression piece. I'm a big fan of catharsis therapy. I believe that the transformational process requires us to feel our awarenesses, right? So the transformational process begins with awareness of the situation, and then allowing ourselves time and space to feel what that means for us, to feel everything that comes up. And as we move through the feelings, we can come out the other side and be able to go into a process of forgiveness and perhaps gratitude before then moving on to creating something better and something more empowered that's going to serve us. So what's no longer serving you? Get real about it. What is it about this friendship that does not work for you? What anger and resentment have you got around that? Do you need to get your baseball bat and big cushion out, which is what I've done many, many times. I used to run something called Tantrum Club, so I do actually have in the loft a stock of baseball bats and big kind of foam cushions. Do you need to just kind of go nuts and just bash something up, punch a pillow, scream into a pillow, scream underwater, cry, write an angry letter, and then burn it? But it's a really important part of the process for you to reach a place of aligned decision, of really sort of knowing who you are and what you want, and then even being able to speak that truth if a clearing conversation is required. To be able to do that, you have to have worked through your feelings. You have to have cleared the path through that. Otherwise, you're bringing all of that stuff into the conversation if a conversation is required. This is about, like I said, putting yourself first, putting yourself at the center of attention, honoring what you feel. Okay, so that's step 2. Step 3 is the fun bit. Owning what you want now. What do you want? You've acknowledged the friendship. You've honored it. You felt all your feelings around what hasn't served you, maybe how you've been let down. Yeah, the guilt, the shame, the whatever has been brought up because of the friendship. And then what do you want instead? Is it no more to the friendship? Is it time to say goodbye to the friendship? And then how might you like to do that? And last week I answered a question about how to have a clearing conversation, and you can catch the replay of that. That's on in my Instagram grid, on IGTV, and in our Facebook group, our Facebook page. So you could have a clearing conversation. It might be a letter, whatever feels good. I really do encourage some level of communication, though. I think it's really, really mean to just ghost somebody. I personally think that is so mean. I was ghosted 2 years ago by one of my closest friends, and try as I might to have a clearing conversation, it never happened. I never had that closure. And for the 10, 15 years that we were very good friends and all that we went through, I just think that's mean and unfair. And I had to do my own emotional expression work around that. I took myself through this process, right? So even if a friendship is ending, and maybe it's not in your control, maybe you have been ghosted. I have spoken to so many clients recently who've been ghosted by great friends. And it's such a vulnerable thing to share and talk about. Even for me now, actually, it doesn't feel cringy because I'm good with it now. I know once upon a time it would have felt awfully cringy to share with you that I was ghosted by a friend. You know, some kind of level of shame in that. Like, what does that say about me? But it happens, and I've worked with plenty of women that has happened to, and it's really upsetting and unfair and mean. And I'm a huge advocate of having the conversation, at least sending a letter of explanation. But I think an opportunity to have a back and forth flow is really powerful. But it's not always going to happen. And when it doesn't, like it didn't for me, I took myself through this process. So I acknowledged and honored the friendship. It was a beautiful honoring because we had some beautiful, wonderful times together. And then I honored actually what didn't serve me about it. So while she ended the friendship, I could see all sorts of things that no longer served me. And I found very upsetting to realize, actually, in a way, I was kind of done a favor by being ghosted. But it took this experience for me to realize how that friendship wasn't honoring me. And then what did I want now was the third part of the line of questioning. Like, what did I want now? And I definitely was able to connect with more empowered friendships, more loving friendships, more open and communicative friendships. That's what I was calling in, right? So it gave me that opportunity to get that clarity. And so for you, if you're going through this process, that will be your step 3 as well. What do I want now? And really own that. Because when, you know, my client was saying she was feeling guilty, whether she did call someone or didn't call someone, or she felt guilty about spending time with someone when she didn't really want to, and yada, yada. That guilt is such a waste of energy, isn't it? It's such an energy drain. Why do that to ourselves? When we own our desires and we own what we want, the guilt leaves the building. I'm not saying it's not a process. I'm not saying it doesn't require a lot of courage and bravery. I'm not saying it isn't a practice. You know, it's something to be practiced to get into a place of being able to really speak your truth with love, and in an unapologetic way. But this is what we're being called to. I really believe self-love is calling us to take a stand for ourselves, to speak our truth. And around friendships, that can be really difficult. Around any relationship, that can be really difficult. So to recap, the 3-step process: if you're uncertain about what's going on in your friendship, first you acknowledge and honor it, the history of it. Second, you do your emotional expression work around it, and you dial into what hasn't been serving you in the relationship. And third, you get total clarity on what do I want instead. Is it over? Is it to be redefined? Do we carry on as normal? Because maybe carrying on as normal, you know you're getting some lessons out of it that you need to get. But you got to own it and then move forward with that ownership. I hope that's helpful. I'm just seeing if there's any comments. How you doing? Saying beautiful words, Katie, and what I'm doing this because it's on Instagram and I can't quite see it. And what an amazing process to let go of those relationships that no longer serve us. Yeah, totally. So if you're saying, yeah, ghosting is awful and it seems to happen so much, yeah, it's just not brave. I'm really going to take a stand for that right now. It's just not brave. If you're ghosting anybody, I think, have a word with yourself and suck it up and be courageous enough to honor the other person that you're in the friendship with. You're allowed to end a friendship. I've ended friendships. We're allowed. But do it in an empowered and loving way that's respectful of what you had with that person. It doesn't have to be a conversation, but find a way of loving the other person enough. Because we're all just humans trying to do our best, right? We're all just here trying to do our best. None of us are perfect. We're all just little kids in adult bodies. Yeah? But be brave and courageous and honor the other person. Every relationship's different. Every friendship's different. And I guess it always will depend on the history of the friendship. But if you've had a serious history with someone and then you just delete them and never speak to them ever again without any explanation on the back of not even there being an argument or anything, it's just mean. Anyway, I've said my piece on that. What's the middle step again? Indigo's asked the middle step. Okay, I'll quickly recap one more time. Step 1, acknowledge and honor the friendship. Step 2, ask yourself, what is no longer serving me about the friendship? So get real clarity on what's not working for you. And it's an emotional expression opportunity right there. So feel your feelings around that. If that means you're writing an angry letter and burning it, do that. If it means you're going to have a good cry, if it means whatever feelings come up, allow yourself to feel your feelings. They're yours and they're valid. And step 3, what do I want now? And owning that, really feeling empowered because you have clarity on what you do want rather than being only focused on what you don't want, which isn't very empowering, right? Sophie, yeah, absolutely. Ghosting seems a lack of courage to me. Yes, me too. Glad I got that off my chest. Thank you, Sophie. Okay, right. Well, I hope that served everybody. No other questions? No, really lovely to spend a few minutes with you today. I hope that's helped. I really honor the clients that have brought this subject up with me this week. There's been more than one, actually. And because I think as an adult, it feels kind of embarrassing to say you've got problems with friends. It feels a bit like something that happened in the playground at school. It can feel a little bit shameful. This idea of kind of not knowing what to do, being in no man's land, feeling guilty. Should I call? But they didn't call. Like all that noise. It just feels a bit adolescent. And yet to admit it is the first step to releasing yourself of it. And I think to share it in a way like this, we're not alone. Yeah, we're not alone. We all go through it. So I'm really glad to share these tips today. It's a process I've taken myself through multiple times, and I will continue to. Self-love is self-responsibility, and to find our answers, to know what the next right move is for us that's aligned with the truth of us, we gotta do our work. We have got to prioritize just taking a few moments out and just working through where we're at with something, and then being able to make a decision and moving forward. And it's got to feel right and true for us. No one can tell you what to do or what's right for you. This is a process for you to figure out what's right for you. Okay, thank you, everybody. Synchronistic timing, excellent. I love that. Yeah, you're not alone, Dylan, and there's so many feeling this right now. Okay, as I said, it was lovely to spend a few minutes with you. Thank you for joining. Have a beautiful rest of your day, and perhaps I'll see some of you live on Friday at 5 p.m. BST for some self-love wisdom. Love you. See you then. Bye. Bye.